I've struggled with various digestive issues over the years, so gut health is extremely important to me. Now, while gut health awareness has increased, it has led to a wellness trend that inspired a host of kind of questionable marketing claims and even false claims. You've seen the word probiotic attached to all kinds of supplements, drinks, and more, and they may claim to deliver the healthy microorganisms our guts need for proper function, but all too often the promises are really too good to be true. Thankfully, I became aware of a company called Seed and their flagship product, the Daily Synbiotic. That's right. Seed's Daily Synbiotic offers 24 clinically researched strains of microorganisms in a single dose. These strains support gut, skin, and heart health and promotes regularity, sometimes within as little as 24 to 48 hours. To me, what really sets Seed's Daily Synbiotic apart is its delivery system. This is my supply. While some products may offer the right strains, they are fragile and they rarely survive the trip through your gut. Seed uses a capsule-in-capsule design that helps ensure that 100% of the probiotics reach your colon where they matter most. Now, I've been taking Seed's Daily Synbiotic, and I encourage you to check out their story and the science behind what they do. To try it for yourself, just go to seed.com/Dr. Drew. Use code Dr. Drew for 20% off your first month of Daily Synbiotic. That is seed.com/Dr. Drew. Use code DRDREW, Dr. Drew. This pandemic began, we were not sure how it spread. Everyone began wearing masks and using hand sanitizers. Great ways to slow the spread, but a lot of people still get sick. I can personally attest to that. We now know that COVID-19 spreads via aerosols and droplets from the nose and mouth, and I've been thinking about this for a while. Why aren't we also sanitizing the nose and mouth, killing the virus directly at the place where it spreads? Why weren't more doctors thinking about this? Well, some doctors have done the research. Wish I discovered it sooner. That's why I'm excited to tell you about Halidine. It's an FDA-registered antiseptic for the nose and mouth that's proven to eliminate 99.99% of the virus that causes COVID-19 in just 15 seconds. That's right. It's created by a team of clinicians with decades of experience in antiviral treatments, initially created to protect healthcare workers. These are smart scientists, and it's a great product that also eliminates many other viruses and infecting particles. I'm using both their nasal antiseptic swab and their oral spray to help protect those around me, and you should be too. For others and for yourself. Whether you're hopping on a 3-hour flight, always use it there, visiting grandparents or attending a meeting that you can't miss, Halidine's family of oral and nasal antiseptics give you the safe, easy, on-the-go antiviral protection for up to 4 hours. I encourage you to try Halidine at halidine.com today. My listeners get 10% off with the discount code Dr. Drew. That is HALODINE.com, discount code DRDREW. So obvious. It just makes sense. Stop the virus before it spreads and gets in your body with Halidine.
Hello, everyone. It's a dose of Dr. Drew.
It is indeed. And thank you all for dropping in. We said we might do something across the weekend, but we didn't actually expect to do something. We were lounging around, and I was sort of roiling through my head the idea that we might do a special stream today. And I was going through TikTok, as is my custom these days. Since I've been sick, I've spent an uncanny amount of time on TikTok. And I came across this. I came across Dr. Scott Jensen's TikTok today, where he was talking about what has happened to him in the Associated Press. And he had a head of steam. And I thought, oh, I'd like to talk to Dr. Jensen. And if you remember Dr. Jensen, he's been on this stream before. And the reason I previously wanted to talk to him is I wanted to give him an opportunity to speak without feeling, he had his license encumbered twice. People had figured out how to use license encumberment as a weapon. And so it really just makes us go through a lot of ridiculous paperwork. We have to pull out a bunch of references that support our opinions and go through the timeline of what we did or didn't do. And it's just an incredibly time-consuming and unpleasant practice or sort of procedure that, of course, leads to nothing when people have done nothing wrong. They're doing what they're supposed to do, which is to look into these things, but it's now been weaponized. And let me just tell you a bit about Dr. Jensen. He is a lifelong Minnesotan. He published his first book in 2015, Relationship Matters, the Foundation of Medical Care. He's a family practitioner. And in 2016, Dr. Jensen received the prestigious annual statewide award, Minnesota Family Physician of the Year. That's from the Minnesota Academy of Family Physicians. So his track record is beyond reproach. He has been acknowledged as a fine physician, and that does nothing in today's world. That means nothing in today's world, evidently. But let me bring in Dr. Jensen. There you are, Scott Jensen. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Dr. Drew. I appreciate it.
So let's start with, I guess, your most recent TikTok where you seem to have a head of steam built up. Tell people what happened.
Well, I simply thought about 2 weeks ago that I just haven't done a very good job of connecting with a younger group. And I think that everybody wants good, crisp, contextual information. So I decided to do a TikTok account. So I got the app, and in less than 2 weeks, I had 250,000 followers, and I started to learn the rules, and friends have helped me as well. But then we would notice that some of the videos I put up would go to 3-4 million, and others would maybe have a couple 100,000, and all of a sudden they'd be gone. And now I think I've had about a third of my videos taken down because of, quote, community violation. So then I went on the TikTok page and tried to understand what was it about a video that caused it to be taken down, because many of these videos are on other platforms without any problem. And what I found was it was impossible to determine why exactly it had been taken down. So I appreciate the TikTok platform, but I'm confused and disappointed that sometimes I can have a video that maybe speaks to Governor Cuomo in New York. And I've had 2 of those, and they've both been taken down. And yet Governor Cuomo is complaining, I see in the papers this weekend, that he's a victim of cancel culture. Well, aren't I a victim of cancel culture? I'm critical of him because I think he fudged the records with long-term care deaths. And so I get taken down, but he's complaining about him being a cancel culture victim. That just seemed funny.
It is funny, and both of us have sort of thought, I may not agree with everything Cuomo did, but I feel bad that he is condemned in the court of public opinion before any due process. That seems unfair for him as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't want to be in his shoes. I think that he's getting hit from a couple different angles, but I think you make a very good point, Dr. Drew. We need to somehow, as a country, recognize the value of, if you will, at some level, being innocent until proven guilty. It seems like that's gotten thrown out the window, but it's also gotten thrown out the window by big tech, because big tech will sometimes come after you or come after me and sort of throw us to the wind because we don't know why.
Yeah, we were taken down on YouTube, and maybe we'll be taken down today too, and they sent us a list of policies. And I read through them all, and they were 100 miles from anything I would ever say. I mean, they really were like, microchips with vaccines and the crazy stuff. And so I was like, no. So I read through it very carefully. The only thing I could find that got close was they were, again, it was a very unclear policy, but you're not supposed to talk about immunity from COVID. You're not supposed to talk about it, which is horrible because we need to share ideas. I mean, there's some interesting data on the vaccines right now showing that you are protected against asymptomatic spread and are protected from spread generally. And we need to share that data and think about it and talk about it. No, and I specifically, I think I was talking about my own immunity in response to having had COVID. I had COVID, and I've been following my antibody profiles, and my antibody levels are through the roof. And there was some data this morning that showed that people with those sorts of antibody profiles may be protected against the variants. We should be talking about that, thinking about that, what to do with those people. Are they free to move about? I don't know. But I guess that's all not on the table for conversation between physicians.
Well, to your point, and that's an excellent point, Dr. Drew, I also had COVID-19 in August. I followed my antibody levels. And once I was certain that they'd been positive 2 or 3 times, I went to the Memorial Blood Center in the Twin Cities, and I said, do you want some of my plasma for COVID-19 patients? And they ran the tests, and they said, yeah, we love your antibodies. So, they would take, I think it was almost somewhere between 500 and 1,000 cc's of my plasma. And they said I had the neutralizing antibodies and all that they wanted. And they said, come back next week. And I said, well, I thought I'm supposed to wait 6 or 8 weeks. And they said, oh, no, we'll waive that. You come back next week also. So here I am. I'm giving my plasma for COVID-19 victims. And yet I'm not being necessarily granted the same kind of privilege that we're being told goes with having received the vaccination. And I'm saying, well, hold it now. When the CDC talks about if you've received your vaccinations and it's been 2 weeks since you got your second dose, or if it's Johnson & Johnson since you got your first dose, you get to do all these things. Well, how about me?
Yeah.
I had the disease.
And
I don't need the vaccine.
And did you have moderate COVID? How was your run with it?
I honestly thought I was having ragweed allergies. I had 4
nothing.
days of symptoms. I didn't even know it.
Oh man, dude, I had I had bad time with it. I still have ringing in my ear and some neurological stuff. But
Sorry to hear that.
but I'm not sorry, because I got to be a subject, and people have heard me talk about this before. I took a monoclonal antibody, made a massive difference for me, and I was able to get out there and talk about that and talk about how available that is, and how if your physicians aren't prescribing it, find another physician. This is a really good intervention. And then I had some long hauler stuff, and I used fluvoxamine for that. It was another new idea, and man, that worked for me. It was, again, sort of dramatic. So again, something to talk to your doctor about. So I'm glad it should have happened to me. But back to your point, I kind of get where the CDC is at in terms of making recommendations about recovering people, in that you and I are physicians, to check your antibody levels. I'm getting a very sophisticated thing called an additive score that checks all my immune spectrum and memory cell function. So I know about what to do to document my immunity. How does the CDC approach this when there's this wide spectrum? People with mild disease sometimes don't have the same immunity mounted that you did. And by the same token, people with moderate to severe like me may not know to go out and document it. What does the CDC do with that spectrum?
Well, and it is a challenge. And I think
Yeah.
to be fair to the CDC,
Yeah.
I mean, I've been plenty critical of both the CDC and the FDA, but I think you're spot on, Dr. Drew. I think that we could make a case that we could encourage people that aren't certain to come and get their IgG antibodies checked, because it's not an expensive test.
Right.
And the laboratories that are used in Minnesota, whether using Mayo Clinic or LabCorp or Quest, these are highly rated, highly reputable lab tests. And I think they can give us a good clue, because there are people that are hesitant to take the vaccine. And I get that too, because a lot of what we're going to see about the vaccine is going to come as months and even years pass by. And we have to be cognizant of that. We learn a lot about vaccines and their responses in the months and years that come.
Right.
And I think if we don't acknowledge that, we're not being intellectually honest. And to your point, I think you're right. The CDC has a difficult challenge. If they have the COVID vaccine documented, they're going one direction. But when I look at someone like you, and I look at someone like me, and I look at patients that have the antibodies and are not interested in the vaccine, it just seems to me like we're being discriminated against, and it doesn't make sense.
Well,
I have the profile that the COVID vaccine patients are looking for.
I know. Me too. I have that times 10, they tell me. I'm like way off the chart. But it's funny. Susan, I imagine, are you listening to this? Did you hear what he said? Because Susan's been saying this for a while. Do you want to comment?
What's that?
About how you feel discriminated against, the population that had the vaccine or had COVID sort of isn't being addressed.
They don't ask that question when you get all the questionnaires going out to dinner, or,
getting on a
have
plane.
you had COVID, or are you vaccinated? It's just like, have you had any symptoms in the last 24 hours? And it's like, well, I feel like we should be able to have a little more freedom once we have the vaccine and say, I've had the vaccine. They'll go, okay, you don't need to fill this out,
It's really interesting.
It just seems over the top. Like they haven't really gotten ahead. Nobody's as proactive about it. They're
right.
always like in the here and now.
Right. So Dr. Jensen, my recollection of the history of how things evolved, the CDC never recommended lockdown or closing schools. They sort of accepted it and started working with it once the states did it, but I don't remember them ever recommending it. Do you?
No, I agree. I think sometimes the CDC sort of got pulled in there almost by some sort of osmosis.
Yeah.
I think the CDC has stumbled and bumbled along the way, to be sure. Many organizations have, and I am certain that I have said things that once we passed a few more months down, I said, hey, I learned something.
Me too. Update your priors. That's how we practice medicine. You update your priors, you share with your peers, you try to approximate the truth, you make risk-reward analyses, which I don't think are being done anywhere, but keep going, Dr. Jensen.
Well, one of the things I've been so disappointed in Minnesota, we've really bastardized science. I think people have forgotten that science it's a relatively disciplined process of thinking. It's observing, measuring, hypothesizing, and then trying to create experiments to determine, does the hypothesis work or not? And in Minnesota, we just have this political mantra, we follow the science. I don't know what that means. Susan made a comment about what questions are asked. And in Minnesota, I don't know why, but in order to get the vaccine, you're being asked what your sexual preference is. I mean, some of this stuff I'm saying, what's going on here? So it's been a little bit of a mess, but the most important thing we can do as we get on the other side of this is we have got to heal. We've got to build bridges. We've got to find a way so that we don't go through this same process again. Honestly, science has been sacrificed at the altar of panic, and we need to do better. We need to say, never again will we allow our science from 2 prior decades be overturned in the matter of months, because we potentially had some researchers put together, quote, a study that was destined to give them exactly what they wanted in terms of a conclusion, because I do think that we've seen that happen, and I understand it. But we have to be better than this next time around, and there will be a next time.
And so there's another piece of this, and I want to talk. Last time we talked, this hadn't come so clear to me as it has since we spoke. So there's 2 things that jumped out at me. One, and you and I have been in practice. You started practicing when?
1981.
Okay, so you got just a couple years on me, but not many. And in our practice of medicine, was it not the case? Am I romanticizing the practice of medicine through the 90s and the 2000s? Is it romantic to say back then we were taught to, much the way if a surgeon gets into trouble in a surgical field, he or she must improvise and create solutions and do what's best for the patient in that moment. We were trained to improvise and apply our clinical knowledge based on what we believed in that moment, based on all of our experience coming forward, supported by the science, but oftentimes the science had to catch up with us, oftentimes. And that has been abandoned completely during this pandemic. Am I correct on that?
You are spot on. I remember the first time I went to Grand Rounds in medical school. Grand Rounds was not a moment where people held hands and sang Kumbaya.
No, you yelled at each other. You screamed at each other. You stood up and said, that's wrong.
Rigorous scientific exercise. And I remember the year I went into dental school, I was president of the dental school class. That was the year in 1976 that we had Legionnaire's disease. And I don't know if you remember it, but that was in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And in Philadelphia, the convention had broken up. People were going home, and people that had been there got sick.
Yep.
And they started dying.
Mm-hmm.
And we used all kinds of big guns in terms of intravenous antibiotics, and it wasn't helping. And someone, I don't know who, stumbled across the fact that this macrolide antibiotic called erythromycin was curing people suffering from this Legionnaire's
No
disease.
Science, nothing yet published, no study, nothing.
Exactly.
It was well ahead of the science.
A year before we were able to isolate the organism and say, yes, this is what, to me, that was the perfect way for me to enter medicine, because in 1981, I would go to Grand Rounds and I would look at a rash, or I would hear a patient report, and I would come to a conclusion, and I would have an attending physician look at me straight in the eye, and they were not kind, and they say, you are dead wrong, Dr. Jensen, and you better go back tonight and read until 2:00 this morning until you can figure this out. And I didn't take it personally.
No.
I just knew they were right.
Yeah, it was the process. You're doing that from the time you're a third-year medical student, getting used to that rigor, that interaction, and not taking it personally. Yeah, so that bothered me, and I mean, all right, let me ask you a crazy conspiracy theory. My feeling was, looking at that happening during this pandemic, I went, oh, well, you don't need doctors. Nurse practitioners and physician assistants will do just fine. Is that part of the plan?
I think what you're asking goes back to what you said before. I think that rigorous process of thinking and improvising and hypothesizing, it's gotten sort of pushed by the wayside. And I think algorithms drive so much of what goes on. And,
right.
And I think that what I know that I'll probably get in trouble for saying this, but I think
Be
sometimes
careful.
younger physicians, and I have 2 younger physicians who are daughters, but I think sometimes they gravitate towards a certain comfort level of an algorithmically designed patient approach.
Right.
And that's not what you and I had.
Right.
We had so much less.
Are
we
we
didn't have
are we
cell
an
phone that we could click in and,
Yeah.
and get the information.
Right.
We had to fight for it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what's happened is we're seeing algorithms drive things. And if someone wants to do something with a patient that hasn't been scientifically confirmed, I'm not going to jump on that physician. I'm going to just ask them, please be certain that you're staying current. Please be certain to recognize your limitations, and please be certain to have a full-fledged discussion with your patient so that the patient understands that this may not be established science.
And I always added one thing to that too. Have a backup plan. Have a backup plan. And I want to know what your backup plan is.
I really think that our medical profession, Dr. Drew, has been fractured. We're quibbling and quarreling with one another with people that we've never met. Typically, we would have gotten on the phone. I would call him. I remember calling up a cardiologist and saying, why did you put my 83-year-old patient on Lipitor? He said, well, gee, doc, he said, she had high cholesterol. And I said, yeah, but you had just done an angiogram and you just got done telling her and me that her vessels are totally clean. So if after 83 years of living, I don't care if she has high cholesterol, you just told me that her vessels look great. Don't you think that we can maybe skip the Lipitor for this 83-year-old?
Yeah. Yeah.
And he sort of, it was sort of a pregnant pause on the phone. He said, well, you make a good point, doc, but if you look at the algorithms, she needs to be treated. And I think that's where we're at. And the only way we're going to get back to common sense, I think, is for the patient to step up.
Yeah, patients need to be aware of this, and to defend your daughters and the younger physicians. They're in these systems where there's an orthodoxy and things get handed from on high, and they're afraid to step. I didn't realize how many of them were in these big systems and locked in, whether it's a corporation or a hospital or a large ER group or whatever it is. They get into trouble when they improvise. It seems like that's a huge loss for medicine if that's true.
It is a huge loss because both of my daughters have this amazing ability to think outside the box and be creative. And if just given the chance, who knows what concepts, hypotheses, ideas they could put forward. I mean, they could change the world. But I think you're right. They're boxed in and they are frightened. And they get into this echo chamber, and it's hard to break out.
I get it. Especially if they really don't think of themselves as, we were trained to do this. They may not have been trained to do it. It's really kind of interesting. And it makes me sad if we can't find a way to loosen this a little bit for medicine, particularly. It's interesting, when I discussed treatment options for COVID with surgeons, they immediately jump on it, and they actually use it on their patients and family, and they're all about improvising. But when you go on the medicine side, they're like, does not fit with orthodoxy. Algorithm does not tell me we need to wait for our randomized placebo-controlled trials. It's like, wow, what happened to my peers? What happened to you guys? So, but here we are. The other thing, you mentioned the abandonment of many years of policy. What happened to the public health? Again, this is all stuff that's sort of come into focus for me since we last talked. And that's why, again, for those of you, I just like sharing with my peers my thoughts so I can find out what's wrong or not wrong with what I'm thinking. That's how we do this. And what I was thinking was about the fact, first of all, I was deep in the AIDS epidemic, right? I don't know if you did a lot of AIDS work, but I did a lot of AIDS work. In fact, that's how I got to know Anthony Fauci. This is a bobblehead with Anthony Fauci right here. And it was him encouraging young physicians to get in the media and educate about HIV and AIDS we didn't have the term HIV yet. We just started calling it AIDS. That got me involved in radio low in the early 80s. And back then, where am I going? Oh, as a result of that, we didn't say, this was 100% fatal illness, 100% fatal, not 1%, 100%. And we never went to people, you have sex with somebody, you kill them, you're a murderer, you're killing people. I would have been unthinkable to give that kind of messaging. And as a result of struggling with trying to change very complicated social sexual behaviors, an entire discipline of public health developed, which is called changing health behaviors. And over the course of 10, 20 years, they determined that narratives, a relatable source, humor, help the buy-in, cause people to change their behavior and not push back. Music, these are all, so you have somebody that looks and acts like you, same age group, an interesting narrative, something funny happens, and oh, that's a rock band I can relate to. That's how you get people to change their health behavior. Not public health officials and politicians standing on high. It's like out of I don't want to get ourselves canceled, but it was unbelievable to me when it happened. It was sort of so anathema to what we had done for 30 years. What happened? Do you have any idea? Panic? It was just we panicked?
I'm going to go back to the title of my book, Relationship Matters. And I think that we've sort of tried to take a shortcut. If we can, as physicians, demonstrate to our patients that we will advocate for them, they will grow to trust us.
Right.
And as we spiral that advocacy and trust forward, we'll get better results. I mean, I think of the patients that have been most successful with in getting them to make lifestyle changes. I don't care if we're talking about reduce excessive amounts of alcohol use,
right,
get rid of tobacco, or lose 10 pounds, or get off the couch. My best results come when my patient feels like I'm there for them. And I'm not trying to bully them. I'm not trying to lecture them. I'm not trying to plug them into an algorithm. I tell my patients, I have obese patients, they're at some level, they're quietly ashamed of their obesity. And they look at me and they say, I should do what you do, Dr. Jensen. And I say, don't do that to yourself. It's not fair. I am not skinny because I have a good diet. Because quite frankly, Dr. Drew, my favorite meal is a beer and 6 Oreos. So I don't have a great diet. But I inherited some genes that keep me slender.
Yeah.
I didn't deserve it. And if we watch ourselves, we oftentimes, as we get older, we start to look like our parents. Now, that's not a coincidence. So I tell patients, please don't feel guilty. If you want to lose 5 pounds, let's roll up our sleeves and lose the 5 pounds. But for heaven's sakes, whether you're big or tall, short, wide, skinny, we're not put on earth to be down on ourselves.
Right.
We're put on earth to smile, touch other lives, and if you will, leave this place a little better than we found it. And if we do that, we're not all wrong.
I couldn't agree with you more. Going back to your TikTok that caught my attention today, I mostly responded to your emotion rather than so much the content of the TikTok. I have to tell you, I immediately just felt the need to talk to you. And so I noticed you were saying something about the AP picking up something and canceling something. What happened with the Associated Press?
Well, that was the oddest thing. I was so taken by 2 things that happened in January. I read an article, and I was actually in Florida going to a meeting, and my wife said, we've got to leave now. And I said, Mary, I am so overpowered by this need to share this. I need to take 5 minutes and do a video. So I did that. And in this video, I commented on 2 things that I thought were potential game changers. One was the World Health Organization had recommended that laboratories not use high cycle thresholds, that they reduce them from 40 to 45 down to a more typical range. I think a lot of laboratories would say that if you use a cycle threshold of 25, you have a decent chance of being able to grow the virus.
Yeah.
If you get to 35, you're getting on thin ice. Mayo Clinic has spoken to this with more expertise than I would.
Yeah.
But that was a big thing, because what you're going to have is, if you reduce the cycle thresholds, you're going to have less positive tests. The other thing that had changed was that we were now being encouraged to not diagnose COVID-19 clinically if we did not have a positive laboratory test. Both of those things were going to make a huge shift. I did the video. I referenced an article that I'd come across, but in the article, evidently there was some unconfirmed information, and that was that the World Health Organization had issued a 2-fold directive on Inauguration Day. So put the video out there. It went crazy. It went to 3, 4, 5 million people. And all of a sudden, less than 2 days later, I get a phone call from the Associated Press saying, we're fact checking it. And I said, well, why? And they said, well, the World Health Organization didn't say that on January 20th. And I said, well, the article I read, written by a reputable author, did say that. I said, let me give you the name of the article and let me give you the author. And I sent that to this person. And I spent 45 minutes trying to talk to this young lady from the southwestern portion of the country. And I tried to explain to her how PCR testing works, what kinds of recommendations physicians have been given in regards to making the diagnosis of COVID-19. And oddly enough, I got off the phone with her, and 36 hours later, my Facebook post had been taken down or blanketed with a dark shadow. So I put a video up explaining it to the world. And then this lady from the southwestern portion of our country called and says, well, we haven't even put our recommendation out on our fact checking yet. And I said, well, you're the only person who's contacted me. So evidently Facebook independently decided to tell me I violated. And then less than a day later, here came Associated Press piling on saying, yep, this Dr. Jensen, he's spreading falsehoods. It reminded me of when USA Today fact checked me 9-10 months ago, and they came out and said, Dr. Jensen's right. It reminded me of when the Board of Medical Practice came after and says, you're spreading misinformation. And then they came back and said, well, I guess you're not. You're okay. Then they came at me again and said, you're reckless. Then I responded and said, I guess you're not. So, I mean, I think I must be the most fact-checked guy around.
You are.
It's so disgusting to me. It's disgusting. That what do any individual members of the Board of Medical Quality Assurance express any ambivalence about them doing this? I mean, do they pull you aside and go, we're just doing our job, I know this is a nuisance? Anything like that, anything collegial about it?
No, I never got to know who my accusers were. I understand that the Board of Medical Practice individual members probably don't feel like it would be staying within the guardrails of what they should do. I have had a lot of physicians quietly call me, text me, email me, and thank me for my courage. But in the same breath, they're apologizing that they're not being strong to themselves. And it's been sort of weird. I really do appreciate the uplifting support. I don't know what percentage of physicians that is, but I've received more of it, and I am grateful for it. But there's an awful lot of physicians out there who just don't feel, Dr. Drew, like you and I do, that they have the security and the platform by which they can share their thoughts. I think they see you get beat up, they see me get beat up, and they say, I'm not going to go there.
Yeah, and let's call it what it is. Their freedoms are impinged upon. They are not free to express their opinions, and that's what kind of troubles me. I understand it, though.
Dr. Drew, I need to jump in there. When I think of heroes like Dr. Scott Atlas and Dr. John Ioannidis and yourself and other people who've been willing to speak, I am so grateful, because I am absolutely confident there will come a day where we will recognize that the way we responded to one another, when we allowed highly reputable, hardworking physicians who've had just an immaculate career get torn down and get canceled. I'm hoping that there will come a day where we say, we weren't right to do that.
I hope so. I don't have great confidence that will be. I just sort of personally, because I have zero political agenda and I'm super moderate, I'm interested in discourse. I'm interested in the truth. And when people are silenced, I'm naturally curious. What causes? What did you say? What happened there? And was there anything worthwhile in what you said that maybe people should hear? I don't know, or maybe it's dangerous, and maybe I'll agree that it should be marginalized. And I can go at that with my words. I can say that's a marginal opinion. I don't agree with it, but you're entitled to your opinion, which we have not had that, you and I. But I'm not afraid to do that either. I do understand people's fear about, if you're out there practicing in the world, reputational injury. You and I have done a lot we've been practicing so long, the patients we have a relationship with aren't going anywhere. They know who we are. They know our skill set. They're staying with us. And so we can sort of maybe take more risk in terms of the possibility of, walking through a fire, which is what we both had to do. I don't know. Am I onto anything there?
I think you are. And I think embedded within your words, there's a little notion of an idea I'd like to tease out of there. We have had to be aware of the fact that our colleagues might not have the opportunity to speak as candidly as you and I have. But I would send a message to all the people that rule big tech, and I would remind them it's difficult to speak without crossing someone's threshold for being offended. I have a couple of Facebook posts and TikTok posts that have gone at mental health and the challenges of living in the shadows of life, living with mental health disabilities. But it's hard to talk about that because nobody wants to insult someone. So if you or I decide to tackle, what must it be like for a mentally challenged individual to live in this time? If we say something wrong or incorrect or politically incorrect, we're not trying to. We're trying to elevate.
Well, yeah, I get what you're saying. For me, it's a little different because I worked in that field for 30 years. I know exactly what to do. I know exactly what the struggle is, and I know exactly how far off the rail we've gone. And so when I advocate, I do it with absolute clarity, and I have zero concern for what people think about my position because I know what I'm talking about. Now, if there's something that is a little less clear out there for me, for instance, then I'm with you 100%. Then I worry that I'm going to misstep or I'm going to, because I'm just trying to help. You know what I mean? I'm just trying to help. I might use a little incorrect language, or I might even have an incorrect opinion, which God forbid, but happens for sure. So I agree with you. I don't disagree with you. It's just that when it comes to mental health stuff, I know. In fact, let me recommend a book to you and to everybody. It's called American Psychosis. American Psychosis. I cannot recommend it strongly enough. It tells you in a first 100 pages or so, you understand how we got here and what a damn mess we've got on our hands. And then
read that book.
American Psychosis. Please do. It'll come to you. Amazon's got it, and everyone should read it. You will be astonished. It's essentially a story of there's a nice follow-on book you might want to read called Shrink, which is by Jeff Lieberman, which talks about the misadventure caused by psychoanalysis taking over psychiatry in the mid-20th century. It's a different story, but one of the corollaries is what happened in our government when a bunch of psychoanalysts decided they knew what was right for humanity and would stop at nothing to dismantle things. They were very much from the Foucault world that there is no such thing as mental illness. These are psychiatrists. No such thing as serious mental illness. So antics ensued from there, trust me.
Well, I think the other thing that happened with this, Dr. Drew, is I think that we have a lot of very, very capable therapists, counselors, psychologists who have absolutely absented this discussion. They are not going to go there. And they have a lot to say. The collateral that has come from some of the policies that have been put in place for COVID-19 is immense. And people just are not speaking to that because they don't want to use an incorrect word, but the anxiety, the depression, the suicidal ideation, the suicide successes.
Oh.
I mean, it just doesn't stop. And this isn't something that's going to go away just because the World Health Organization at some time says the pandemic's over. This is going to be residual damage control for years to come.
Absolutely. Oh, there's a lot packed into what you said. So Fauci just today said he's concerned there's going to be a mental health pandemic. He is correct. The 8 to 15-year-olds have been just obliterated by this experience, and the trajectories of their life, like you say, will be affected for years to come. Plus, lots of serious mental illness and addiction has been triggered by the pandemic, per Fauci's worry about another pandemic in mental health. And let me get behind our psychology, LCSW, PsyD, all our colleagues who I work very, very closely with. They, much like the physicians trained in the algorithms, the majority of them are trained in an age where they don't contemplate that they can change the system. They've never really seen it differently, and a lot of them have not worked in a psychiatric hospital where you see the really writ large consequences of the current laws pertaining to serious mental illness. I spent 30 years struggling with this, and the laws have gotten more and more and more draconian, causing more and more and more death and more heartbreak for family members. People that advocate the law, let me be really clear. Now that once COVID ends, I'm going to go back to my homeless pursuits, helping the homeless. And let's be super clear. People that advocate these laws are murderers. And what I ask them constantly is, what is the body count before you change your policy? What's the body count need to be? 4 a day die in LA County every day. What's your body count before you're willing to listen to somebody who knows how to do this? So I'll stop there, Scott.
Back onto that, Dr. Drew, and thank you for your passion. In Minnesota, when I was in the Senate, I remember seeing some graphs of the number of children that are on antipsychotic medications. And I have this great fear that as we deal with this onslaught of mental illness over the next year or two, that we might have that knee-jerk reflex continue where we're seeing young 8 to 15-year-olds being put on antipsychotics.
Yeah.
We talk about mental health coverage, but the therapists aren't getting paid for it. So what we end up seeing is more and more pills, access to a therapist that might help these young kids develop strategies to sort of get into a better place is not happening. And so we're going to make it worse. We're going to make it worse because we're going to try to take shortcuts. And it's a very depressing picture for me.
Well, because I know how much it could turn around. I just know that I have a little bit of more optimistic frame because I just know what we could do. We're not able to do it. But let's leave that for a second, and you and I'll come back and do homelessness on a separate thing someday, conversation. Let's talk for a minute as we sort of let me see if there's anybody has any. James Johnson, American Psychosis about the federal change in mental health policy. Absolutely, my friend. That's how the state systems got destroyed and left people with serious mental illness to go to the prisons, the street, and the nursing homes. That's it, and to death. I'll just look at your guys' notes before I go on to a new topic here. Yes, Wiz Chris is talking about the lack of access to mental health services, which I heard in New York, they're literally for adolescents and children, 0 available beds in the entire state of New York. Good job, everybody. We've done a great job helping our youth. Okay, so I want to talk Susan's going to the thread. What's that, Susan?
I was a little slow. Sorry.
That's all right. That's okay. I want to talk to Dr. Jensen again. Variants. Let's talk a little bit. Let's just share ideas for a minute about the variants. I as a COVID survivor, I don't want it again. Thank you. I had an ass full of it when I had a bad go of it, and that was enough. And I'm still a little long hauler stuff left behind. And the variants, I don't say frighten me, concern me. I did see some data, I think I mentioned earlier in the thread this morning, that suggested that people with moderate to severe COVID have pretty good antibody activity against the variants, which was heartening to see. I keep seeing more and more data about particularly Pfizer and variants, and I guess Johnson & Johnson and variants, and it looking good, and Moderna coming up with a booster. Where do you sit on the variant situation? And I guess what I'm really asking is, how serious do you think the possibility is of variants taking hold and breaking out and us having to do something in response to that outbreak?
Well, thanks for the question, Dr. Drew. And on this one, I need to be sensitive to the fact that I don't want to color outside the lines too far. I am not a virologist, but I certainly have, I studied epidemiology and public health in 1976 in dental school, and certainly have some of that. And I took a lot of history of medicine classes in undergraduate at the University of Minnesota. But to my way of thinking, when you look at the 1918 pandemic and you look at the 1957 Asian and the 68 Hong Kong and the 1976 swine, and you look at the 2002 SARS, and you just keep going forward, the avian flu, and we've got the MERS, and we've got the Ebola, and now we've got the pandemic now. Honestly, people need to understand that variants are nothing more than the product of a mutation. And generally, these viruses want to mutate in a downward cycle so that they don't kill the organism. The organism for a virus that matters is the human they're infecting.
Right.
If the human dies, then the virus dies too.
Right.
That's why Ebola, in a sense, has been unsuccessful in maybe causing the havoc that some of the movies might create in terms of the fear of the audience. But I remember I was contacted by a major news channel probably maybe 4 months ago, and they wanted me to speak to the issue of the fact that there was mutations taking place. There were mutations taking place, and so we were getting variants, and they were less virulent. And I remember declining to go on because I said, I don't think we know that yet. Mm-hmm. We'll go forward 4 months, and now we got the B1117. And in Minnesota, we've had a fair amount of this virus. But the fact of the matter is, and these are the contextual facts that really do matter, hospitalizations are down.
Yeah.
ICU usage is down.
Way down.
Deaths are down. Cases are down. The percentage of cases that are being caused by a variant has increased, but it came from zero, so it sort of had to increase.
Right.
But I really don't see in this situation, I don't see anything happening that should cause people to think that we should be terribly pessimistic and that the sky is falling. I don't think we need to be the Chicken Little character. The New York Times said over the weekend that pessimism is now being identified as a huge problem because it does undermine us as humans. It undermines our immune system. It undermines our ability to fight back, move forward, interact, get mentally healthier. So from my perspective, I'm not letting the creation, the identification of variants bother me. And I'm telling my patients, we're fine. We're absolutely fine.
Yeah, I think that's right. I have zero concern about B1117. I'm a little bit concerned about B1351, just because it's a translocation. It's very different, and I don't want to get it again. I don't want to get it again. Thank you very much, but I don't. I think it's a low probability that we get another big outbreak. I think it's what's that?
If you
Susan?
got it again, would it be as bad?
Well, that's part of the question. We don't know if the variant is sufficiently different than what my body has seen. It could be. I mean, who knows? It could be worse. I mean, you just don't know. It's those you worry about stuff like that when you've been through a bad. It's like a PTSD. You go. I
gave birth to triplets. I know. I never had another child.
Yeah. You wanted? Would that mean you wanted another one?
We thought about it. Remember for like 5 minutes, and I went.
Yes. When the kids were 2, we were like, oh,
no,
they
were
great.
like 6 months.
They're so great. We should do that again. And then we looked at each other and what is wrong with us?
They all started crying at the same time.
So
I only got to go through the baby phase once.
But the next question I have that's related to the variant question, which is the ecology of the virus. And now you and I are going to tiptoe into territory where we are not telling you, we are, I don't know how to say this strongly enough. This is not our field. We're just two physicians kind of chatting it up. Do not take this to be any sort of dogma or conclusion or firm opinions. But I have noticed when I look at the outbreaks this last summer, they were awful, but they were pretty much the same in places where there were severe lockdowns as where there were no lockdowns. That's the first observation. The next observation is, in my state, they were telling us constantly, Christmas, New Year's, it's going to be a huge, horrible outbreak. That was when it turned around and went down. And then the Super Bowl came along, and they're like, Super Bowl, it's going to be a mass spread Super Bowl. And it continued down at the same rate. So when I just, as a not even a scientist, just as somebody looking at patterns, I look at that and I go, well, I'm not sure. I don't know. Maybe we did something. I don't know quite what's going on here. And part of the problem is we don't know what makes the virus go up and go down, everybody. That's just a fact. We think we do. We like to feel like we make a difference when we change our behaviors, but we actually don't know. There's theories that our immunity, guys like Dr. Jensen and me who've had COVID, are adding to the sort of the way it spreads, the resistance to its spread. There's theories that there is, in much the way that the influenza went away, that maybe we have some protective factors going around from COVID, or maybe when one massive virus moves in, other viruses are pushed out. Notice how we don't all get one cold virus after the other, right? If the one good one moves in, gets us, and then the other ones don't seem to come around. So I'm wondering, is it something to do with that COVID just does what it does? When it does it, it pushes out other viruses, just the way if lions come into a savanna, they push out the hyenas. I guess the simpler question would be, when we look back at this and really study it, Are we going to find that the way the virus behaves is something different than perhaps what we thought, where we had really very little control over it?
There's a lot in that question that you asked. And
Yeah.
to try to unpack it, I agree with you. I think pattern recognition is far more important than people may realize. I think if you look at the Midwest, arguably you could say Minnesota has had some of the most draconian mitigation measures put in place. Lockdowns and sort of an arbitrary definition of what's an essential business or not essential. In the governor of Minnesota, he said that churches are not essential, exercise places are not essential, but liquor stores are.
Right.
In situations,
It's
candy
weird.
stores could be open, big box stores. You could all congregate in the plumbing aisle at a big box store,
Right.
but you couldn't visit the.
Right. This was you must have been just like California, because this was the thoughts going our head. It's like always like, well, but I guess they're doing something. We got to do. And by the way, when you push the California officials on what they're doing and why, they will essentially say we had to do something. And we had to do something is a dangerous thing for for health professionals to say we have to do something. That's how you create iatrogenesis. That's how you hurt people, just doing something.
When I think those patterns I was referring to, if you look at the patterns of Minnesota to South Dakota, North Dakota, Iowa, there might be blips along the way, but now as things are starting to sort of level out, we're seeing that, well, for instance, South Dakota with Governor Kristi Noem, she didn't put any of those draconian measures into place. While Minnesotans lived under those, we still have a curfew here, which surprises me. Yeah. But I think those patterns are one thing. I think another thing that you mentioned to me, or you mentioned in regards to the way this virus behaves, there's an interesting article where Mayo Clinic, I think, is doing some studying on did people do better with COVID if they had had previous vaccines more recently.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Specifically live virus vaccines like measles, mumps, and rubella.
I saw
which
that.
Is a trivalent, all three live viruses.
Yeah.
And their logic was able to be applied to first world and third world countries around the globe. And so I think that's going to be something we'll study. And then there's the question of, does a blood type matter? And so I think there's so much to unpack in what you're saying. And that's actually, Dr. Drew, what has frustrated me so much when I look at, coding diagnoses incorrectly or more liberally. I think when we sabotage the precision of our data, we make it more difficult for us to learn a year or two down the line. Was it because COVID virus came in and pushed all the other influenza virus away? Or was it because we quit testing for influenza virus?
Right.
Or was it because we tested everybody for COVID virus, but we used a test that has too high a false positive rate because we allowed too high a cycle threshold? All of these things are muddying the waters, and they're going to make it more difficult for us to glean from this COVID-19 pandemic the high quality information that we might have otherwise had. I know that people are out there dismissing me and saying, what the hell is that family doctor saying? He doesn't know anything. Okay, fine. But these are questions that are legitimate. And I'm not trying to be just some evil skeptic. I'm just saying we have compromised the ability for us to learn as much as we could have learned.
Right. I would say at very minimum, even if you don't agree with the questions that Dr. Jensen is suggesting, or you feel like they've been adequately responded to across the course of the pandemic, these are the kinds of questions we need to ask. We need to be examining and questioning. That's how science works. It's sometimes the most outlying ideas. I mean, Einstein was an outlier, way outlier when he showed up. And it's because they didn't take him seriously until they started questioning what he was saying. That's how it came. That's how we got the general theory of relativity. But I agree with you wholeheartedly. I did talk to the governor of North Dakota when he was being so eviscerated for not mandating masks and mandating this and mandating that. And he during the outbreak, he went to it for a while, and it seemed to make a difference. That I would point at that as like, maybe it did make a difference in certain situations for certain periods of time. It's interesting also as it pertains to masks now. We're about, Andrew Ashkasvili, who's one of our regular visitors on the Restream here, said that he believes the CDC is going to come out in the next day or two to say that social distancing is now going to be reduced to 3 feet instead of 6 feet, which actually concerns me, because one of the things that happens when people wear masks is they push the air through the mask, which creates an aerosol, which can go 20 feet. So are we these are things that need to be really thought about, and maybe not publicly. I don't know. Maybe the public shouldn't be part of this discourse. It freaks them out too much. I think the public have a right to hear scientists talk. But
the social distancing thing that you mentioned, there's actually, and I could be dead wrong on this, but the studies I read and the I looked at about a year ago in regards to social distancing was, I think there's actually more studies available that indicate that prior to 2020, social distancing in many first world countries was considered 1 meter, which is 39 inches.
Right.
And when we went to 6 feet, that was a relatively arbitrary declaration. And then for a while we had it circulating that 6 feet wasn't enough. It should be 12 feet. And if someone was running by you, it should be 32 feet.
Right.
It got to the silliness of you can't impeach science just to fearmonger. So I think if we go back to a social distancing of 39 inches, that may not end up being wrong. That may end up being right. But we're going to have to wait until we can have reliable, good science done, because we have cheapened what science is this year.
I agree. And I would argue that all that data you referred to about running by and 6 feet and 12 feet and 20 feet, people should, if they're concerned, adjust your behavior accordingly. I think that's wonderful to keep up in the currently available science and if you want to be the most conservative you can be, please, by all means, I encourage you to do so. But for the state then to mandate that, we are in outer space at that point, right?
Absolutely. And, if I could just add one other thing there. I look at the masks, and I don't want to go there. I mean, I've gotten beaten up so badly on that, my stars. It takes weeks or months for my bruises to heal. But I do think that there's this phenomenon of using shields. I mean, the shield allows nothing to go through. And I cannot help but hope that when we get on the other side of this and we start doing research, in Minnesota especially, we were nation leading for a long time in terms of the percentage of our COVID deaths that occurred in long-term care facilities. We had policies that made it very easy for active COVID-19 patients to be discharged from the hospital to the long-term care facilities. And it was no mystery how long-term care facilities experienced such horrific death counts. At the same time, we had facilities that were supposed to be housing convalescing COVID-19 patients closed and instead used for homeless people. And yet they were going to be the place where COVID-19 patients could convalesce and become non-infectious. We had such a mishmash of policies. I can't help but wonder if in long-term care facilities, shields might not have been a better tool, because in long-term care facilities, for me anyway, 80% of those patients are hard of hearing. Masks make it extremely difficult to communicate verbally.
Oh, that's
With
interesting.
shields, there's much better communication with them.
Oh, my. Hadn't
These
thought
are
about
the kinds
that.
of questions I hope that we ask when we get done with this, so that long-term care facilities aren't going to be, if you will, so incredibly targeted by future pandemics.
Well, let's end on a positive note. I think we've surveyed the scene and we've talked about things that makes us nervous or concerned, or when things that could have been done better, and that's our job, frankly. But I am fairly optimistic at this point. I fear getting too optimistic, which is probably the result, as you said, of your bruises still healing from previous knockdowns, and including severe outbreaks and all the things we've all been through. It gives you a little PTSD, so you're always. And I generally, my thinking is always, I catastrophize. I have anxiety disorder, so I tend that way. So I don't like to get too positive for fear I'm going to jinx it. But I do feel like, I think this summer, in all probability, we are going to be back to something like normal. We will have to contend with the fallout, as we've discussed, from a mental health standpoint and a cognitive, social development standpoint with our kids. And we didn't even get into how many ways that's going to be manifest. But you tell me if you agree with me. To leave things on an optimistic note is probably quite realistic.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah.
I could not agree with you more.
Yeah.
2009-10, the pandemic, the H1N1 swine flu. If you look at when that started, I believe it started in January, and literally 18 months later, 19 months later, I think the World Health Organization announced the end of the pandemic in August of 2010. It was 18 to 19 months. And when they look back, there were many epidemiologists and infectious disease specialists that said that actually they could have done that announcement in April, 4 months earlier. That's about where we're moving to. We're seeing tremendous drop in hospitalizations, ICU usage. And I honestly think we could have done a lot better if we would have allowed more aggressive outpatient treatment of COVID-19.
Oh my God, yes.
Such a smackdown that doctors got so nervous.
Yes, sir.
You know, hats off to all those America's frontline doctors that said, we're going to keep pushing because frankly, we could have done better. But the bottom line is, on a note of optimism, I think we're in a good place compared to where we were. I'm optimistic that July 4th is going to be a tremendous celebration of freedom. And I would encourage everybody to remember, if we're going to celebrate our freedom on July 4th, we also need to experience the recommitment on our parts to make certain that never again will we let the freedoms be taken from us that might have been taken from us too casually.
Again, or at least not take our freedoms for granted. That's how I've walked away from this. Like, wow, freedom is something I think about a lot now, and I didn't used to think about it so much. And it's kind of interesting. And that is one of the outcomes of all this. And so it's going to be interesting how it all plays out once we start to move about again. I do think that there's tremendous hunger for social contact. We were out in our own town last night. Susie, you want to describe what you saw?
I'm gonna pull the video up.
Oh, the town. It's because on tomorrow this state is loosening up.
I just thought of it. I was emailing it to myself.
Yeah, and last night we went out to support local businesses and restaurants, and people clearly already were manifesting what was coming. And it was pretty extraordinary. It was kind of exciting, and I was happy to.
Sorry, it's not fast enough. I was.
Is this the bicycle thing you're showing? Or? Yeah. So I don't know if she wants to show it just yet.
I'm trying to find it. I'm trying to pull it up. Oh, here it is.
We're also loosening up in Minnesota. Governor Walz has turned the dials some tomorrow. I'm confused as to why we haven't been kinder to children in the turning of the dials, and I'm also confused as to why we still have an 11 o'clock curfew at night. But evidently the COVID-19 virus particle goes to sleep at about, I don't know if it's 12 o'clock, so we got to get to bed before then. I'm not quite sure how that works, but I'm sure that we'll get an explanation sometime.
That is, by the way, one of my criticisms as I think back. Let's, in medicine, we're always updating our priorities and adjusting course. You politicians don't seem to be able to do that. You double down instead of adjusting. Here's a perfect example.
Don't call me a politician.
No. I don't mean you. When I say you politicians, I mean that's what Dr. Jensen is talking about. It's like, why? That's the silliest thing in the world to have that curfew. Update your prior. Adjust. It's okay. You were wrong. Whatever. Or it was good at the time. No longer good. Adjust. So you hurt people by not doing that. Susan, do you have that video?
I'm getting it. Okay, hold on.
Okay, relax.
I'm not that fast. I'm sorry.
All right, Dr. Jensen, there's a lot we could talk about, and I'll bring you back. I'll save some of the more philosophical topics for next time we get together, and we'll sort of stay on the medical track today. Anything else you'd like to see before I let you go?
I just, regardless of all that we've been through, I'm so grateful to people across the globe that have reached out to people like you and people like me and supported us. Sometimes I don't know if they realize how wounded and bruised we get. And it has really been a source of tremendous support. So I would just say thank you. I know that I've been undoubtedly incorrect at times. I never tried to be incorrect. And going forward, I'm going to try to be more correct. But that's the way of science.
Yeah, and I don't think people appreciate how much it hurts when literally all you're trying to do is do something good. You're trying to do good, and then you get hammered for that. That's especially wounding. So to have some support is nice.
Okay, I don't think there's going to be any audio, but here.
Okay, let's show Dr. This was just down the streets of Pasadena last time.
We're having dinner. All the restaurants are open. They've extended the restaurants into the street. It's sort of like everything's outdoors.
People were just
really busy.
And my point was, in Pasadena, we seem to have an impulse for parades.
I don't know
and
if
they
he could
withheld
hear
the
you.
Rose Parade this year, so we started having parades in the street anyway. So,
I don't know if he could hear us because I didn't have the
No,
sound
you couldn't
on.
hear it. It's okay. You got
But it was
that.
just it was so funny. I told somebody they're spreading the virus all over the city for us. But it was refreshing.
Well, no, those guys weren't wearing masks, but we
Some
were
of
all
them.
wearing masks. We
Yeah,
were all
they
still
were all
doing our
young
thing.
and-
The restaurants were following protocols and blah, 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 blah,
So
blah.
that
That's
was
fine.
our
If it
Rose
helps, great.
Parade this year. It
Great.
was the bike parade.
Yeah. All right,
It's
Dr.
the
Scott
Doodah
Jensen.
Parade Part 2.
Follow him on Twitter at SMJ2203.
No, that's his TikTok.
What did I say? Twitter?
His is Dr. Scott Jensen on Twitter.
Okay, Dr. And it's Dr. Scott Jensen? Yes. And then I was thinking TikTok. I must have said Twitter at SMJ2203. He's got a lot of interesting thoughts he puts out most days, and I find them sort of inspirational. So I would urge you to kind of swing by and take a look at him, follow, put him on your following list. And, him and between him and Dr. Knock, who is our virologist friend, you get a pretty good sense of the virology, the latest vaccine, what's going on clinically, controversies. Kind of keep an eye on things, and then show up for us here. I'll try to keep you abreast of what's available. Our desire is not to push an agenda. We are trying, I have this thing on the Dr. Drew After Dark called the Rational Revolution. This is our little sign for the Rational Revolution. We're just trying to get rationality back into the discourse. My son coined the term rational renaissance, which I thought was even better. And I'd like to see us all carry that crucible forward. Dr. Jensen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Dr. Drew.
You bet.
Thank you, Susan.
You're welcome.
And,
Anytime.
Well, literally anytime. And so, Susan, I'm going to switch back to here, right? Stay over there.
But I just wanted to. I had somebody on the Restream say that they wanted to see the triplets.
Our triplets?
Yes.
When they were little?
Yeah, and why I'm so adverse to getting pregnant ever again.
Okay, we'll show your picture. You want to show?
So here's my Instagram.
Look at the lower right-hand corner. Look at the lower right-hand corner. Look at that poor woman. Look at what happened to her. And then watch my hair turn gray across the sweep of this.
They were such cute babies, though. And see them when they were like that picture in the middle when they were about
6 months.
No, that was 1 year. And then when they were in the bathtub, and they were so cute. But the picture right above them is them.
Why is there a beach picture just sitting there in the middle of all that?
We were in Mexico for Thanksgiving, and remember I carved the turkey? You see the turkey there?
No.
They gave it to me to carve. Remember when we were at Cabo Azul?
No, I know, but I just see a beach picture above your head when you're so pregnant down there in the lower right-hand corner.
Oh, that's Mexico.
Okay,
so
just making
it was
note.
their birthday, November 11th, so I did like 3 pictures in a row.
I see. Okay,
and then we went to Mexico
got it.
before COVID, and we were in a communal place serving turkey.
Got it.
Remember they brought all the turkeys out on the beach?
Where's Swiss Chris?
Do you remember it?
Oh yeah, I remember it. I know exactly what you're talking about. I'm just doing 6 things at once here. Whiz Chris, don't you have anything to say about all those kids? There you are. My 3 kids are fighting over a broken Tupperware lid right now. That's what I'm talking about. Good for you.
Yeah, we
Let's
had
see.
that too
No,
at some point. Okay. Yeah, it was definitely an experience, and I love my kids dearly. I would never trade them in.
All right, very quickly, people are
but
asking about
I don't ever want to be
bobblehead.
like
This is
big
Dr.
and fat like
Fauci, again, my North Star during all this stuff. You may agree or disagree, but you're free to do either. This is part of my new behavior in life, which is my UVC light and my seed and Halidine, which is not up here for some reason. So,
because you can smell farts on an airplane. I just have to say through a mask.
Good, well done.
Also, tomorrow we're going to have Sam Shocker on. Do you want to explain?
Yeah, Sam has a brother-in-law who got severe COVID, and she has a hair-raising story to tell. And I don't want to take, I don't want to take aim at her brother-in-law's doctors, but they are what Dr. Jensen and I were just talking about. They were afraid to do anything to him as he got sicker and sicker and sicker. I could have been him had my doctor not been, properly on top of the literature and taking proper improvisational clinical decision making. I could have been him. That's the story we're going to tell tomorrow. And Sam, of course, was my co-host on HLN for many years. She now does a show called Daily Blast Live. And she and I will get into it a little bit tomorrow. We also have, Susan, we have a bunch of guests this week, right?
We have Eliza Blue coming on Thursday on Ask Dr. Drew. She is going to talk about sex trafficking and her organization that helps people avoid the same situation.
Anybody else this week?
I don't think so. Not yet.
Okay.
I'm sure somebody will fill in Tuesday and Thursday or Wednesday, or we might do a local Zoom party again, or we might do a Clubhouse. I learned how to make the Clubhouse sound come through the system this week.
Oh, nice.
I don't know.
Cool.
We're going to goof around and, I don't think there's anybody else.
Okay. I have some update on people are asking about Attic Score here. I have some update on this. There is something called easy testing. It's for those of you in California, it's around the state of California. There's going to be one in Pasadena in a few weeks. EAZY testing, and they will do additive scores for you. So we have our first outlets for the additive scores. I think, was it Tom's? I saw you in there. You wanted to get a score and think about the vaccine. Additive score at EZ testing, EAZY. Look it up, see if there's a testing site near you. They are going to expand the availability to additive score.
This is Additics?
This is Additics. This is they now have sites that can order it and send it in and draw it. It's only in California so far as I know, but it's just part of their rollout. So hopefully
do you go to this website, additicscore.com?
I would go to yes
or drdrew.com/score if you can't spell Additics.
Right. Easy testing, EAZY testing is where I went to find the sites. So there. You go.
They don't have a link on the Additics website?
I don't know. I haven't been on there since they opened it. The easy testing just started. So.
Can you say that again? I'll type it out.
EAZY testing. I'll go on Additive Score and see if they have anything while you're doing that.
.com?
Yes. EasyTesting.com, I believe. Let me double check that.
Let's send Douglas there.
Oh, yeah. That's a good idea.
We have a theory of where Drew might have gotten
if I didn't get
COVID.
it through the mask, we wonder about my son, who's a little bit superhuman like Susan is.
He may have had it and we didn't know. But because he had a positive test and then I thought it was a false positive.
It is not clear from the Additive Score website about the easy testing. Let's see. What? The easy testing is something you're going to have to take my word for it.
There it is. COVID testing in California.
That's the easy testing?
But that doesn't say for
Additive Score. Go to Additive Score and you can see, well, don't do it. That's kind of a cool website. I kind of like that.
Isn't that look cool?
Yeah.
Well, go to the additicscore.com too. Maybe they'll have update something there. We'll double check and get back to you guys this week.
It really doesn't say it on the
Think of all the money that's been spent on
testing.
Yeah. I mean, I saw there millions and millions and millions of people have taken the test and were not positive. And I think about all the times you've had to test, like 3 or 4 times every time you do a show. And then, everybody's got to test before they go on a plane. And then after they get on, and it's like the money spent. It's like everybody's, their rebate from the government is all going to COVID tests.
Yeah. Hey, Christopher Lundgren.
Stimulus.
I did not see Dr. Campbell's videos this morning. He probably, I bet, is taking aim at the vaccine rollout in Europe, which has been not so great.
I heard that from my Polish housekeeper that Poland had an uptick and they closed everything.
Yes, I'm aware of that. But I don't know.
How come? Do you know?
I don't know the details. I just know that that's happening. So I will try to take a look at that, so I'll have something to say tomorrow.
It's still freezing cold out there.
Yep. All right. As usual,
everybody's indoors.
It's time for me to go to the bathroom, so that means we have to stop.
Do you have to have a
It used to be I had to stop because I just couldn't go another second because of COVID, because I was so fatigued. Now it's because.
Oh my God, you're so funny.
Yeah. So let's do this. All right, we'll see you tomorrow around 3 o'clock, Susan. Is that correct? We no longer have Fox, so we don't have to do it at 3 if we don't want to.
We're doing it at 3 because that's when Sam can come.
Okay, perfect.
And then we're going to start making it a little later every day. At 3 o'clock on Thursday, and then we'll start doing it later in a week after that.
All right. I'm looking if there's anything else. I do need to do it at 3 on Wednesday because they scheduled something afterwards.
Okay.
So. All right, we'll see you guys tomorrow. I am so grateful for our friends at Blue Microphones. Not only have they completely changed what our show sounds like, they've given me headphones so I can monitor things better. This is the mic for millions of creative people, and now I know why. I'm so grateful for them completely changing the quality of our audio. You'll find Blue mics like Yeti and the Mouse, which we're using here, both in pro studios and home studios, literally all over the world. Their popular Yeti caster is a Blue Yeti microphone plus a boom arm system that's behind many of your favorite podcasts. I run into them all the time, and now I know why. If you've ever thought about creating your own podcast or YouTube channel, Blue can make you sound and look great. Just visit bluemic.com and click Get Started, and you can start telling your story. As we're gradually moving back to opening schools and businesses and, of course, our in-person interactions, I want to remind you, this is all time with cold and flu season getting going. Staying hydrated is key to helping your body deal with the added stress and with the upcoming flu season. My regular fans have heard me talk about a product called Hydrolite for a long time now. It's an amazing rapid rehydration drink. It's a mix that, well, we're obsessed with here. I'm excited to announce they've just released Hydrolite Plus Immunity, just in time for cold and flu season. Hydrolite Plus Immunity starts with their fast-absorbing electrolytes and adds a host of immune-boosting ingredients. Each single-serve, easy-pour drink mix contains 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C and 300 milligrams of elderberry extract, creates what is hopefully immune-boosting formula that's high in antioxidants and zinc. Combining this with Hydrolite's 7 key electrolytes, it's a fantastic way to stay proactive and properly hydrated. Hydrolite Plus Immunity comes in convenient, easy-to-pour powder sticks that rapidly dissolve in water and make a great tasting drink that has 75% less sugar than your typical sports drink. It uses all natural flavors, and it is gluten-free, dairy-free, caffeine-free, non-GMO, and it is vegan. And you can find Hydrolite Plus by visiting hydrolite.com/Dr. Drew. Again, that's HYDRALYTE.com/DRDRW. And be sure to use our code Dr. Drew 25 at checkout for a special discount.